New chicken little sandwiches. Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Do you remember those lost American sandwiches that used to fill lunch boxes and kitchen tables? The ones you'd spot in old cookbooks or hear about from grandparents? Built from simple ingredients but packed with comfort. These were the quick fixes, the thrifty meals, and the quirky creations that carried families through hard times and happy ones alike. Somewhere along the way, they slipped out of fashion. So let's bring them back to the table. Lard sandwich. Once upon a time, before avocado toast and oat milk lattes, the humblest of spreads held court in American kitchens. Lard. Yes, that soft, snowy white fat scraped from pork and treasured in Depression-era households became the star of the simplest sandwich you can imagine. 2 slices of bread, often homemade and dense, smeared with lard like it was the finest butter. Maybe a sprinkle of salt if you were lucky, maybe a dusting of sugar if someone wanted to dress it up. That was it. The origins of the lard sandwich lie in necessity. During the Great Depression, butter was expensive, meat scarce, and every calorie counted. Lard, cheap, plentiful, and shelf-stable, stepped up as the fat that fueled working families. Immigrant communities, especially German and Eastern European households, had already known the joys of schmaltz and fat-spread bread, so the practice carried easily into American kitchens facing hard times. Preparation was laughably simple. Bread was sliced thick, the lard was soft enough to spread, and the topping chosen according to mood, savory with salt, onions, or even pickles, or sweet with sugar, cinnamon, or honey if available. The sandwich was filling, greasy in a comforting way, and delivered the kind of slow-burning energy a laborer needed before heading into fields or factories. There's a nostalgic quality here that almost defies modern sensibilities. Grandparents recall these sandwiches not with shame, but with a quiet pride, proof of survival when the cupboard looked bare. Some even say the lard sandwich tasted better than butter, a bold claim in today's wellness-obsessed world where lard has been demonized, redeemed, and demonized again. Compared to the $12 artisanal toast topped with whipped bone marrow you'll find in hipster cafes, the lard sandwich was the original nose-to-tail frugality. Simple, resourceful, and oddly comforting. It reminds us that survival can be as straightforward as bread and fat. Ketchup sandwich. If the lard sandwich was the fuel of the Great Depression, the ketchup sandwich was the edible sigh of the mid-century American pantry. It's exactly what it sounds like. 2 slices of bread with ketchup in the middle, sometimes toasted, often not, and always served with a dash of embarrassment or a shrug of acceptance. Born from frugality and desperation, it was the kind of meal you made when payday was still 2 days away. The fridge echoed with emptiness, and the only thing left in the cupboard was a half-empty Heinz bottle. The ketchup sandwich carried with it both practicality and a strange kind of defiance. Bread filled the belly, ketchup provided tang and a hit of sugar, and together they made something that, while no one would mistake it for gourmet, felt more dignified than eating condiments straight from the spoon. Kids in the 1930s and 40s grew up on these, their mothers trying to stretch every last nickel. Even into the 1970s, the ketchup sandwich lingered in lunch boxes and late-night snacks, especially in working-class homes where improvisation was a daily art form. Making one required no culinary training, just bread and ketchup and maybe a little creativity if the mood struck. Some spread the ketchup thick, like jam, others added a slice of onion, a dusting of pepper, or a few potato chips for crunch. Toasting the bread could elevate it, giving the illusion of effort, but really it was still ketchup and bread. No disguise could change that. Today, the ketchup sandwich has become a kind of nostalgic punchline, the butt of TikTok jokes or poor kid meals lists. Yet for those who grew up with it, it carries a bittersweet warmth. It was proof that even in lean times, people could take the simplest, cheapest things and still make a sandwich worth remembering. Onion sandwich. There's a certain honesty about the onion sandwich, a working-class staple that never pretended to be more than what it was. Sharp, pungent, and filling. At its simplest, it meant raw onion slices tucked between two pieces of bread, sometimes softened with a swipe of butter or margarine, if fortune allowed. In its most basic form, it was bread, onion, and the will to carry on. Cheap, available year-round, and capable of making a meal feel substantial, the onion sandwich was one of those Depression-era creations that proved you didn't need luxury to keep going. Onions were the perfect ingredient for hard times. They stored well in cellars, added bite and flavor to otherwise bland foods, and were endlessly versatile. Farmers and laborers often carried onion sandwiches in their lunch pails, the lingering smell as much a badge of survival as a social hazard. Immigrant families, especially from Eastern Europe, were already familiar with bread and onion combinations, and the tradition carried easily into American kitchens when money grew tight. Preparation could be as austere or as inventive as circumstances allowed. Thick onion slices provided crunch and fire, butter or lard mellowed the bite, and a sprinkle of salt turned the whole affair into something surprisingly satisfying. In some households, onions were caramelized for sweetness, but more often than not, they were eaten raw, tear-inducing, and unapologetic. It was a sandwich that announced itself in every room it entered. Nostalgically, people recall the onion sandwich as a food of grit, not glamour. It was eaten by those who didn't have a choice but found a way to make do. Compared to today's artisanal caramelized onion focaccia sandwiches, the onion sandwich stands as a stark ancestor, humble, unadorned, and unforgettable. It whispered resilience with every crunch, proof that even the simplest ingredients can hold a family together. Peanut butter and mayo sandwich. Few sandwiches stir more debate at family gatherings than the peanut butter and mayonnaise sandwich, a curious, Southern-born creation that leaves outsiders blinking in disbelief. At first glance, the pairing seems like a dare, the kind of thing a bored child might slap together in the kitchen. Yet for decades, particularly in the American South from the 1930s through the 1960s, this unlikely duo was considered a legitimate and even beloved lunch. Its origins, like many resourceful dishes, lie in hardship. During the Great Depression, peanut butter was cheap protein, shelf-stable and hearty, while mayonnaise was a tangy, fatty spread that stretched flavors and calories alike. Together, they created a filling sandwich that required no meat, no special ingredients, just two pantry staples and bread. For families trying to feed children on a shoestring budget, it made perfect sense. Preparation was straightforward, but not without its little rituals. The bread was usually white, soft, and sliced thin. Peanut butter went on one side, mayonnaise on the other, the two mingling in the middle to create a creamy, salty, sweet, slightly tangy concoction that somehow worked better than it should have. Variations appeared depending on taste or availability. Bananas added for sweetness, lettuce for crunch, or even a drizzle of honey when sugar was scarce. For many Southerners, the peanut butter and mayo sandwich is a nostalgic taste of childhood summers, the kind of lunch eaten on porches or packed in paper bags for school. Outsiders may recoil, but those who grew up with it often describe it as comforting, even crave-worthy. Today, it sits on the edge of culinary folklore, mocked by some, defended passionately by others. In a food culture obsessed with reinvention, perhaps this humble, head-scratching combo deserves a second look as the original salty-sweet trendsetter. Bologna and potato chip sandwich. If childhood in mid-century America had a mascot, the bologna and potato chip sandwich might well be it. This was the kind of lunch you found in countless lunch boxes across the country. Soft white bread, a floppy round of bologna, and a satisfying crunch of potato chips tucked right in the middle. It was a marriage of convenience and kid logic, Why have your sandwich and your chips separately when you could experience the joy of both at once? For parents, it was cheap and fast. For kids, it was culinary genius. The sandwich's roots sit squarely in working-class ingenuity. Bologna, often derided as the poor man's cold cut, was inexpensive, widely available, and endlessly adaptable. Potato chips, especially after their mass market boom in the 1950s, became the crunchy sidekick to nearly every American lunch. Combining them was almost inevitable. And by the 1960s, the bologna and chip sandwich had become a quiet classic in school cafeterias and suburban kitchens alike. Preparation was as casual as it gets. You started with 2 slices of white bread, often smeared with a swipe of mustard or mayo, a slice or 2 of bologna, sometimes fried, sometimes straight from the fridge, went down first. Then came the chips, often plain, though barbecue or sour cream and onion made their way in as snack aisles expanded. The final step was the best part, pressing the sandwich together until the chips cracked beneath your hands, creating that first bite of salty, crunchy bliss. Nostalgically, this sandwich carries the sound of crinkling chip bags and the smell of waxy lunchbox cartons. It wasn't glamorous, but it was playful and oddly satisfying. Today, chefs dress up the idea with artisanal salumi and house-made crisps, but nothing quite matches the guilty joy of smashing Lay's into bologna and calling it lunch. Amish chow chow and cold meat sandwich. Among the many sandwiches that have slipped quietly into history, the Amish chow chow and cold meat sandwich stands out as both thrifty and vibrant, a reminder that frugality doesn't always have to be bland. Chow chow, for the uninitiated, is a colorful pickled relish made from whatever vegetables happen to be on hand. Cabbage, green beans, peppers, onions, even the season's odds and ends that might otherwise go to waste. Tangy, slightly sweet, and full of crunch, it was the perfect way for Amish families to preserve their harvest and carry a taste of summer into the cold months. Layering chow chow over slices of cold meat, often leftover ham, bologna, or roast beef, turned a humble sandwich into something special. The meat provided salt and substance, while the chow chow offered brightness and bite, cutting through the heaviness with the zing that livened up even the plainest bread. It wasn't about luxury, it was about balance, making use of what you had while still creating something flavorful. In Amish and Mennonite communities, these sandwiches often appeared in lunch pails carried to fields or workshops, a portable reminder of homegrown resourcefulness. Making one was simple but satisfying. Thick bread, preferably homemade and hearty, formed the base. Slices of cold meat went down first, sometimes buttered beneath to keep things from soaking through. Then a generous spoonful of chow chow spread across the top. The combination gave each bite a medley of textures: chewy, crisp, tangy, and savory. For those who grew up with it, the sandwich is pure nostalgia, tied to canning days in hot kitchens and family tables where nothing went to waste. Today, when pickled vegetables have become trendy in artisan delis, the chow chow sandwich seems almost prophetic. What was once a thrifty farmhouse lunch now feels like an early chapter in the story of American food revivalism. Liverwurst and mustard on rye. There was a time when the liverwurst and mustard on rye sandwich was as ordinary in an American lunch as peanut butter and jelly. Walk into a mid-century deli and you'd find it waiting. Thick slices of soft, earthy liverwurst paired with a smear of sharp yellow or spicy brown mustard, all held together by rye bread that carried its own tang from caraway seeds. It wasn't fancy, but it was filling, deeply flavored, and proudly old world in spirit. Liverwurst, with its smooth, pate-like texture, came to America with waves of German immigrants in the 19th and early 20th centuries. For families who grew up on wursts, sausages, and preserved meats, liverwurst wasn't exotic. It was comfort food, a taste of home. Rye bread, too, was part of that heritage. sturdy and flavorful, built to stand up to robust spreads. The mustard cut through the richness, adding bite to what could otherwise be too heavy, and together the three elements made a sandwich greater than the sum of its parts. Preparation required little more than a knife and a hearty appetite. Thick slices of liverwurst were spread or laid onto rye. A stripe of mustard added brightness, and that was it. Some families dressed it up with onion slices or pickles, but many insisted on keeping it plain and honest. The flavors were bold enough to carry themselves. For older generations, this sandwich evokes memories of lunch counters, corner delis, and grandparents who considered liverwurst an everyday staple rather than a curiosity. Today, it's largely disappeared from mainstream diets, overshadowed by turkey clubs and chicken wraps. Yet in niche delis and among those who remember, it remains a cherished classic. In a world obsessed with novelty, the liverwurst and mustard on rye stands as a reminder that simple, heritage flavors still have a story to tell. Olive loaf sandwich. The olive loaf sandwich is one of those mid-century creations that now feels like a relic from a stranger's lunchbox. Yet for a long stretch of American history, it was a deli counter regular. Olive loaf was a curious invention, essentially a bologna-style cold cut studded with pimento-stuffed green olives. To children of the 1950s and 60s, it looked almost festive, like someone had decorated their meat with confetti. For parents, it was practical, a ready-made slice of meat that already came with its own garnish built in. The origins of olive loaf trace back to America's love affair with processed meats, especially after World War II, when the food industry leaned hard into convenience. Bologna was already cheap, popular, and easy to produce. Adding olives gave it a splash of color, a touch of briny tang, and a marketing edge that made it stand out in the deli case. Sandwiches became brighter, quirkier, and, at least in theory, a little more sophisticated. For families on a budget, it offered both novelty and economy, stretching a simple sandwich into something that felt just a bit more special. Making the sandwich was as straightforward as it gets. White bread, a slice or two of olive loaf, and maybe a swipe of mayonnaise or mustard was all it took. Some added a leaf of iceberg lettuce for crunch, or a slice of American cheese to soften the saltiness. But most of the time, the olive loaf spoke for itself, its polka-dotted slices making kids either smile with delight or wrinkle their noses in suspicion. Today, olive loaf has all but vanished from mainstream lunch boxes, remembered with a mix of fondness and mild horror. In an era where charcuterie boards and artisanal meats reign supreme, the olive loaf sandwich stands as a symbol of a quirkier, thriftier America, where even your cold cuts wanted to look like a party. Spam and pineapple sandwich. The spam and pineapple sandwich might sound like something dreamed up in a dorm room after midnight, but it actually carries a surprisingly rich history rooted in war, scarcity, and a taste for sweet and savory pairings. Spam, that canned wonder of spiced ham, became a fixture of American diets during World War II when fresh meat was rationed and the military relied on its long shelf life. In Hawaii and the Pacific, spam became not only survival food, but part of the culinary landscape, embraced and adapted into countless dishes. Pairing it with pineapple, Hawaii's other iconic export, felt as natural as putting peanut butter with jelly. The sandwich itself was deceptively simple. A slice of spam, sometimes fried to give it a crispy edge and deeper flavor, was laid onto bread and topped with a juicy ring of canned pineapple. The pineapple's syrupy sweetness cut through the salty richness of spam, balancing indulgence with brightness. Some versions leaned tropical, adding lettuce or a smear of mayo, while others went for pure convenience, stacking canned meat and fruit between plain white bread with little ceremony. For many families in the 1950s and 60s, especially those who grew up on the post-war marketing boom of Hawaiian-inspired dishes, This sandwich was a taste of something exotic without leaving the kitchen. It was vacation food for people who had never seen a palm tree in person. A sweet, salty fantasy served on a plate. Kids often loved it. Adults found it oddly refreshing. And nobody denied it was cheap and filling. Today, the Spam and pineapple sandwich feels quirky, even kitschy, yet it lingers as a reminder of resourcefulness and cultural blending. In an age where fusion cuisine is celebrated, perhaps this humble pairing deserves a comeback. After all, it was doing salty sweet long before TikTok snacks made it trendy. Pimento cheese sandwich. The pimento cheese sandwich may not have the glamour of a club or the heft of a hoagie, but in the American South, it reigned as king of the lunch table for decades. Known lovingly as the caviar of the South, pimento cheese wasn't just a spread, it was a cultural staple, tucked into church picnic baskets, lunch pails, and school cafeterias from the 1940s through the 1970s. It was creamy, tangy, and just the right kind of messy. A blend of shredded cheddar, mayonnaise, and chopped pimentos that transformed humble ingredients into something indulgent without breaking the bank. The origins of pimento cheese go back further than many realize. In the early 1900s, cream cheese mixed with canned Spanish pimentos was marketed as a fashionable spread. Over time, the South adopted and adapted it, swapping cream cheese for sharp cheddar and making it heartier, more affordable, and infinitely more flavorful. The sandwich became a star at social gatherings and even earned a place in sporting lore, famously sold by the thousands at the Masters Golf Tournament in Augusta, Georgia. Preparation was easy enough for even the least confident cook. A generous layer of pimento cheese was slathered onto soft white bread, often with the crusts left on for substance. Some households added extras, pickles, bacon, or tomato slices, but the classic stood on its own. It was cheap, filling, and portable, a working person's sandwich with just enough flair to feel special. Nostalgically, the pimento cheese sandwich recalls lazy summer afternoons, church socials, and school lunchrooms buzzing with chatter. Today, while still beloved in the South, it has faded from the national spotlight, overshadowed by trendier spreads and gourmet cheeses. Yet, in an era obsessed with comfort food revivals, the pimento cheese sandwich remains proof that sometimes the simplest mixtures create the strongest traditions. Egg and sardine sandwich. The egg and sardine sandwich is the kind of meal that immediately divides a room. Half wrinkle their noses, the other half smile with a glint of nostalgia. It was once a common sight in mid-20th century America, particularly in working-class homes where affordability mattered more than presentation. Sardines, sold in tidy tins, were cheap, high in protein, and kept for ages in the pantry. Eggs, equally humble, added heft and comfort. Together, mashed into a coarse spread or layered simply on bread, they formed a sandwich that was both practical and surprisingly nourishing. Its roots stretch back to immigrant traditions, where preserved fish was a staple. In coastal communities and factory towns alike, sardines were considered reliable, everyday food rather than the punchline they often are today. Mixing them with boiled eggs created something heartier, stretching one can of fish to feed more mouths. During the lean years of the Great Depression and the rationing of World War II, combinations like this weren't just thrifty, they were necessary. Preparation could take a few different forms. Some families mashed hard-boiled eggs with sardines, adding a little mayonnaise or mustard for creaminess. Others laid slices of egg over whole sardines, letting the salty oil soak into the bread. Onions or pickles occasionally joined the mix, providing brightness to cut through the richness. No matter the method, the result was filling, portable, and unapologetically bold in flavor. For many who grew up eating them, these sandwiches carry the scent of Saturday lunches at the kitchen table or quick bites packed for a shift at the mill. Today, the idea might sound outlandish in a culture that treats sardines as niche health food. But in its time, the egg and sardine sandwich was a symbol of resourcefulness. It proved that sustenance didn't have to be fancy to be memorable. Banana and mayo sandwich. Few sandwiches have the power to make outsiders recoil and insiders sigh with nostalgia quite like the banana and mayonnaise sandwich. To some, it's culinary blasphemy. To others, it's the taste of childhood summers and paper bag lunches. Born in the American South, this odd couple of creamy mayo and sweet banana slices earned its place as a cheap, filling, and oddly comforting staple, especially during the lean years of the Great Depression and beyond. The appeal, strangely enough, makes sense when you think about it. Bananas were one of the first truly affordable fruits available year-round in the US, thanks to aggressive importation during the early 20th century. Mayonnaise, meanwhile, was rising in popularity as a shelf-stable condiment that could stretch flavors and add richness where butter or other fats were scarce. Put the two together on soft white bread, and you had a sandwich that was quick, inexpensive, and satisfying in a way that defied logic. Preparation was straightforward but required a little care. Bread was slathered with a generous layer of mayo, bananas sliced lengthwise or into rounds, and everything pressed together into a soft, slightly slippery package. Some people added a sprinkle of sugar to enhance the sweetness. Others swapped in peanut butter for a more indulgent version. But the classic remained mayo and banana in its purest, most bewildering form. For those who grew up with it, the banana and mayo sandwich isn't a joke. It's a memory of sticky fingers, hot kitchens, and the kind of resourcefulness that turned limited ingredients into comfort food. Today, it's often lumped in with weird Southern foods, mocked on social media or side-eyed by foodies. Yet, in a world obsessed with salty-sweet mashups and unconventional flavor pairings, this humble sandwich might just deserve a quiet, dignified comeback. Salmon salad sandwich. Before tuna took over as the reigning queen of canned fish sandwiches, the salmon salad sandwich held its own as a lunchtime favorite across America. For much of the early to mid-20th century, canned salmon was every bit as common as canned tuna is today. It was inexpensive, widely available, and, importantly, considered a touch more upscale than its tuna counterpart. Housewives clipped recipes from magazines that promised hearty, elegant lunches made from nothing more than a tin of salmon, a jar of mayo, and a loaf of bread. The preparation mirrored tuna salad almost exactly. Canned salmon, sometimes pink, sometimes red, was flaked into a bowl and mixed with mayonnaise for creaminess, a dash of mustard for zing, and often a bit of chopped celery or onion for crunch. In some kitchens, hard-boiled egg found its way into the mix, stretching the protein and mellowing the fishy flavor. Spread thickly on soft white bread or tucked into a buttered roll, it was simple, filling, and surprisingly versatile. For Sunday suppers or more formal occasions, the salmon salad sandwich might even be cut into neat triangles and served on platters, proving that a thrifty dish could still play dress-up. Nostalgically, the salmon salad sandwich recalls a time when convenience foods still felt exciting, when opening a can of salmon carried the promise of an affordable but satisfying meal. Children of the 1950s and 60s remember it appearing in their lunch boxes, sometimes to their delight, and sometimes to the envy of classmates still stuck with plain bologna. Today, the salmon salad sandwich has largely been eclipsed by tuna, chicken, and even egg salad. But for those who remember its briny, creamy bite, it remains a symbol of mid-century thrift and ingenuity, a forgotten cousin in the great American sandwich family tree, waiting patiently for rediscovery. Mock chicken sandwich. The mock chicken sandwich is one of those culinary illusions born out of necessity, a dish that sounds extravagant, but is really just a clever sleight of hand from the kitchen. During the Great Depression and other lean years, families who couldn't afford actual chicken still craved the hearty, savory comfort it provided. Enter the mock chicken filling, a concoction usually made from ground bologna or pork, sometimes even a mix of leftover meats bound together with mayonnaise, hard-boiled egg, and seasonings. The result, when spread thickly between slices of bread, gave the impression of chicken salad without requiring an actual bird. Its origins are tangled in thrift and immigrant traditions. In many German-American communities, stretching meats was common practice, and recipes for mock versions of expensive dishes became a fixture in community cookbooks. The mock chicken spread was cheap, versatile, and a little aspirational, allowing families to feel like they were enjoying something special when money was tight. For children growing up in the 1930s and 40s, this sandwich was simply what lunch tasted like, a resourceful nod to flavor without the price tag. Preparation was straightforward but varied widely depending on what was available. Bologna was the star in most versions, ground fine until it mimicked shredded meat, then blended with mayo, onion, and a touch of mustard or pickle relish. Spread onto soft white bread, it had the richness and tang of chicken salad, even if the flavor was more playful imitation than perfect match. Today, the mock chicken sandwich has all but vanished, living on mostly in old church cookbooks and the memories of those who ate it as children. In hindsight, it represents more than just a meal. It's a testament to the ingenuity of cooks who could conjure comfort out of scraps, proving that taste often matters more than authenticity. Jell-O mold sandwich loaf. Few dishes capture the peculiar bravado of mid-century American cooking, quite like the Jell-O mold sandwich loaf. Equal parts party centerpiece and culinary dare, it was a towering, layered creation that merged the practicality of a sandwich with the theatricality of a gelatin mold. Popular in the 1950s and 60s, when entertaining was as much about spectacle as sustenance, the sandwich loaf was designed to, impress guests with its sheer audacity. This wasn't just lunch, it was architecture on a platter. The basic concept was deceptively simple. Layers of sandwich fillings, egg salad, tuna salad, pimento cheese, chicken salad, stacked like bricks between slices of bread that had been trimmed of crusts. The entire loaf was then frosted with a generous coating of whipped cream cheese or mayonnaise to resemble a cake. For the pièce de résistance, it might be garnished with olives, parsley, or hard-boiled egg slices, pressed decoratively into the surface. In some particularly adventurous households, the loaf found itself encased in gelatin, giving it that shimmering, slightly wobbly effect that could both dazzle and disturb. Preparation was labor-intensive, more craft project than cooking. Cooks assembled fillings in advance, carefully layered and trimmed the loaf, and then spread the icing with the patience of a baker. It was a dish made to sit proudly at church luncheons, baby showers, and holiday buffets, daring guests to admire it before daring them to eat it. Nostalgically, the Jell-O mold sandwich loaf speaks to an era when food was about optimism and showmanship. Today, it often gets mocked in retro cookbooks and meme-worthy recipe cards, but it also fascinates with its creativity. In an age of Instagrammable food, perhaps it was ahead of its time, a visual spectacle that asked, why settle for a sandwich when you can have a sandwich cake? Cottage cheese and pineapple sandwich. There was a time when the cottage cheese and pineapple sandwich was the height of health-conscious eating, a darling of 1960s diet culture that promised lightness, freshness, and a hint of tropical flair. Long before kale smoothies and protein bowls, cottage cheese was the miracle food of choice. Low in fat, high in protein, and endlessly versatile. Pair it with canned pineapple rings, the golden jewel of mid-century pantries, and suddenly you had a sandwich that seemed both wholesome and exotic. The kind of thing you'd proudly serve at a ladies' luncheon or pack for a figure-friendly lunch. The origins of this pairing reflect post-war America's growing fascination with convenience foods. Canned fruit had become a household staple, a way to bring brightness to the table regardless of season, while cottage cheese was heavily marketed in magazines as the slimming alternative to richer spreads. The sandwich offered a neat balance of creamy and tangy, sweet and savory, and best of all, it fit neatly into the calorie-counting ethos of the time. Preparation was straightforward but carried an air of ceremony. Soft sandwich bread, usually white or whole wheat, was layered with a generous spread of cottage cheese, then topped with pineapple, either crushed and mixed in, or whole slices carefully arranged. Some added a sprinkle of black pepper to cut the sweetness, while others leaned into the tropical angle, mixing in a bit of coconut or chopped maraschino cherries for color. For many, this sandwich is remembered with a kind of affectionate bemusement. It was light, refreshing, and undeniably odd by today's standards, yet it spoke to an era when health food still felt like an indulgence. In today's world of acai bowls and kombucha, the cottage cheese and pineapple sandwich lingers as a retro reminder that people have always searched for the perfect balance between nourishment and novelty. Deviled ham sandwich. The deviled ham sandwich was once a staple of lunch counters, picnics, and quick suppers, a thrifty little marvel born out of the canned meat boom of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. At its heart was Underwood deviled ham, one of the oldest continuously produced American food products, packaged in its iconic white can with the Red Devil mascot grinning mischievously from the label. For generations, that can meant convenience, flavor, and just a touch of spice, ready to be spread thick between slices of bread. The name deviled didn't imply anything sinister. It simply meant the ham had been seasoned with mustard, pepper, and a hint of other spices to give it a lively kick. Mixed with mayonnaise or softened butter, sometimes bulked up with chopped onion or celery, it became a smooth, savory spread that turned plain bread into a satisfying meal. In the days before refrigeration was widespread, canned meats like this were lifesavers, offering a reliable source of protein that kept well on pantry shelves and could be used at a moment's notice. Making a deviled ham sandwich required little more than opening a can and wielding a knife. Soft white bread was the standard, though rolls or rye sometimes made an appearance. It was a sandwich that didn't need embellishment, though pickles, lettuce, or hard-boiled egg could be added to stretch the filling and add variety. For families on a budget, one small can could make several sandwiches, and its strong, salty flavor meant nobody felt deprived. Nostalgically, the deviled ham sandwich represents the ingenuity of an era when canned goods were celebrated as modern miracles. Today, it's remembered with a mix of fondness and curiosity, often relegated to retro recipe collections. Yet its legacy endures as a reminder that convenience and comfort sometimes come in very small cans. Velveeta grilled sandwich. Before artisanal grilled cheeses oozed with sharp cheddars and imported bries, the Velveeta grilled sandwich reigned supreme as the melty comfort food of mid-century America. Velveeta, that glossy, golden block of processed cheese food, was marketed from the 1920s onward as a modern miracle, smooth, consistent, and meltable in ways real cheese never quite managed. For busy mothers, bachelors, and just about anyone with a frying pan, it promised a sandwich that was foolproof, affordable, and gloriously gooey. The charm of the Velveeta grilled sandwich lay in its simplicity. 2 slices of white bread, a couple of neat squares of Velveeta, and a hot skillet with a pat of butter were all it took. As the bread browned and crisped, the Velveeta transformed into molten silk, stretching with every bite in a way that thrilled children and satisfied adults. Unlike sharper cheeses that might separate or turn oily, Velveeta behaved with the predictability of science, ensuring that every sandwich delivered the same indulgent result. It wasn't just about taste, it was about image. Advertisements in the 1950s and 60s portrayed Velveeta sandwiches as wholesome family fare, perfect for after-school snacks, quick dinners, or midnight cravings. Paired with a bowl of Campbell's tomato soup, it became an iconic comfort meal, the kind of thing that defined childhood for millions of Americans. For some, the smell of butter hitting a hot pan still conjures memories of rainy afternoons and the quiet satisfaction of biting into bread that crackled at the edges while the center oozed with golden warmth. Today, the Velveeta grilled sandwich feels retro, overshadowed by gourmet reinventions of grilled cheese. Yet its legacy remains strong, a reminder that comfort doesn't have to be complex. Sometimes the most enduring pleasures come from a square of processed cheese and a skillet full of butter. Cucumber cream cheese sandwich. Delicate, crisp, and just a little bit prim, the cucumber cream cheese sandwich has long been associated with refinement, even though it was once as commonplace as any lunchbox staple. Popularized in America during the mid-20th century, but with roots in British tea culture, it was the sort of sandwich that carried an air of elegance without requiring expensive ingredients. At its heart, it was simply thin slices of cucumber layered over a cool spread of cream cheese, all tucked neatly between slices of soft white or wheat bread. It wasn't built to fill a farmer's stomach, but to offer a refreshing bite, the kind of thing you might find at a church social, a garden party, or in the dainty hands of a hostess who wanted to impress. The appeal of the sandwich lay in its contrast of textures and flavors. Cream cheese, smooth and tangy, softened the bite of the bread while acting as a cushion for the crisp, watery crunch of cucumber. A sprinkle of salt, dill, or chives often elevated it, giving the sandwich just enough personality to keep it from tasting too plain. Some versions swapped cream cheese for butter or combined the two, but cream cheese quickly became the American standard as convenience foods grew in popularity. For many who grew up with them, cucumber cream cheese sandwiches evoke memories of warm afternoons, picnic blankets, and the quiet pride of serving something that felt just a bit fancier than peanut butter and jelly. They were light, refreshing, and, let's be honest, a little bit smug in their simplicity. Today, they've largely faded from everyday rotation, overshadowed by heartier deli fare and fast food. Yet, in an era where light lunches and nostalgic bites are making a comeback, the cucumber cream cheese sandwich still whispers of simpler, more genteel times. Tuna and potato chip sandwich. The tuna and potato chip sandwich is one of those creations that feels like pure childhood invention, but was, in truth, a lunchbox legend for decades. Born in the mid-20th century when canned tuna became a household staple and potato chips had cemented their place as America's favorite snack, the pairing was almost inevitable. Why keep your chips on the side when you could tuck them inside your sandwich and get that irresistible crunch in every bite? It was cheap, it was filling, and most importantly, it was fun. At its base, the sandwich followed the familiar tuna salad formula. A can of tuna was drained and mixed with mayonnaise, sometimes bulked up with chopped celery, onion, or a hard-boiled egg. Spread generously onto white bread, it was already a satisfying meal. But the magic happened when someone, likely a clever kid at the cafeteria table, decided to slip in a handful of potato chips before closing the sandwich. The result was a mashup of creamy and crunchy, salty and savory that elevated a humble lunch into something memorable. The chips themselves varied with taste or availability. Plain salted was the classic, though barbecue and sour cream and onion became popular twists as the snack aisle expanded. The real ritual was the smashing, pressing the sandwich together until the chips shattered inside, producing a satisfying crackle and a texture that no ordinary tuna salad could deliver. For many, the tuna and potato chip sandwich brings back memories of brown bag lunches, summer afternoons, and the delight of sneaking a little mischief into something ordinary. Today, chefs might dress up tuna salad with capers, artisanal bread, or fancy aioli, but the charm of this sandwich remains its playful irreverence. It was proof that sometimes the best culinary innovations are born from nothing more than curiosity and crunch. Sloppy Joe's cousin, the Spanish burger. Long before fast food chains perfected the hamburger assembly line, there was the Spanish burger, a curious relative of the Sloppy Joe that once held a proud spot on diner menus and school lunch trays. Despite its name, it had little to do with Spain and even less to do with burgers as we know them today. What it really was, in essence, was seasoned ground beef cooked loose in a skillet and served on a bun. Messy, saucy concoction that predates the fame of the Sloppy Joe by a good decade or two. The Spanish burger emerged in the early 20th century, particularly in the Midwest, as a thrifty way to stretch ground meat and feed a crowd. Some versions were little more than ground beef simmered with onions, ketchup, and a touch of chili powder, while others leaned on tomato paste, Worcestershire sauce, or green peppers for extra punch. Unlike a traditional hamburger patty, there was no shape to it, just a ladle of hot, seasoned beef spooned onto a bun, often soaking through the bread before you could finish eating it. Preparation was fast and forgiving, which made it a favorite for lunch counters and school cafeterias. The meat mixture could simmer in a pot for hours, ready to be scooped onto buns as hungry customers lined up. It was messy, yes, but in the best possible way, the kind of sandwich that required both hands and a napkin or two. Today, the Spanish burger has been almost entirely eclipsed by its more famous cousin, the Sloppy Joe, which carried the same spirit but gained better branding and nationwide recognition. Yet for those who remember it, the Spanish burger remains a nostalgic bite of Americana, a reminder of a time when even the simplest, sloppiest sandwich could proudly call itself a meal. PB and marshmallow fluff. If there was ever a sandwich designed to thrill a child and horrify a dentist, it was the peanut butter and marshmallow fluff sandwich, better known as the Fluffernutter. Born in New England in the early 20th century, it paired two pantry staples into something sticky, sweet, and undeniably fun. Peanut butter provided the salty, protein-packed backbone, while marshmallow fluff, an airy, gooey spread invented in Massachusetts, brought a cloud-like sweetness that turned every bite into a sugar-laced indulgence. Together, they made a sandwich that felt like dessert disguised as lunch. The Fluffernutter rose to prominence during the 1960s when Marshmallow Fluff's makers marketed it aggressively as both kid-friendly and nutritious, though nutritious was always debatable. Advertisements cheerfully suggested it as the perfect school lunch, and many children agreed. Parents appreciated its simplicity. No cooking, no chopping, just 2 slices of soft white bread, a swipe of peanut butter, and a generous layer of fluff. Some households added sliced bananas for extra heft, but the purists stuck to the original: gooey, sweet, and slightly messy. The sandwich became a cultural touchstone in New England, so much so that Massachusetts even proposed making the Fluffernutter the official state sandwich. For many who grew up eating them, it evokes memories of brown bag lunches, sticky fingers, and after-school snacks devoured in front of Saturday morning cartoons. It was cheap, it was cheerful, and it gave kids a taste of indulgence in an era before fruit snacks and granola bars dominated the shelves. Today, the PB and fluff sandwich lingers as a nostalgic favorite, still beloved by some and ridiculed by others as a sugar bomb. In a food culture that now worships protein shakes and avocado toast, the fluffer nutter remains unapologetically whimsical, a reminder that sometimes joy is as simple as peanut butter and marshmallow clouds between slices of bread. Bologna and mustard sandwich. For much of the 20th century, the bologna and mustard sandwich was the undisputed king of the lunchbox. It was the working person's meal, the schoolchild's midday staple, and the quick fix for anyone who needed something cheap, filling, and reliable. Bologna, spelled bologna on the package, but almost always pronounced the folksy way, was the great equalizer of cold cuts. It was affordable, came in neat pre-sliced rounds, and lasted in the fridge longer than most other meats. Pair it with a swipe of mustard, the tangy condiment that cut through its salty richness, and you had a sandwich that was simple, sturdy, and satisfying. The origins of this pairing lie in frugality and convenience. After World War II, as processed foods filled grocery shelves, bologna became a household staple, advertised as both economical and wholesome. Mustard was the natural companion, cheaper than mayonnaise and better at balancing the fatty bite of bologna. White bread, soft and squishy, was the canvas on which countless bologna and mustard sandwiches were built. For many kids, the sight of that sandwich wrapped in wax paper or plastic wrap meant lunch was ready, no questions asked. Preparation required no fuss. One slice of bologna, or maybe two, a smear of yellow mustard, and bread was all it took. Some families added cheese, lettuce, or a slice of pickle for variety, but the classic needed nothing extra. Its appeal wasn't in extravagance, but in its predictability. Every bite tasted the same, and for many, that was exactly the point. Today, the bologna and mustard sandwich has slipped into nostalgic memory, replaced by turkey clubs and deli subs. But for those who grew up with it, it represents more than just a cheap lunch. It's the flavor of school cafeterias, factory lunch breaks, and a time when simplicity ruled the American sandwich. Cheese and pickle sandwich. The cheese and pickle sandwich may sound like a British import, but for much of the mid-20th century, it held a quiet but steady place in American kitchens and lunchboxes. At its heart, it was a simple pairing: sharp cheddar or American cheese layered with pickles between slices of soft bread. Yet in that simplicity was a balance that made it memorable: the creamy richness of cheese, offset by the tangy snap of pickles, a combination that managed to feel both thrifty and indulgent at the same time. Its popularity stemmed from the accessibility of its ingredients. Cheese was affordable, readily available in blocks or pre-sliced, and offered necessary protein. Pickles, often homemade or bought in jars, were an inexpensive way to add brightness to otherwise heavy meals. Families that practiced canning often had shelves lined with jars of dill, bread and butter, or sweet pickles, making this sandwich not just cheap, but also seasonal in a way. It was a perfect example of Depression and wartime-era cooking logic. Use what you have, make it filling, and let flavor come from pantry staples. Preparation was uncomplicated. Bread, white, wheat, or rye, was buttered or spread with mustard, then layered with slices of cheese and pickles cut lengthwise or in rounds. Some preferred a thick slab of cheddar with dill spears for a bold bite, while others leaned toward processed American cheese with sweet pickles for a gentler, almost dessert-like twist. Either way, it was a sandwich that delivered both texture and taste without requiring much effort. Today, the cheese and pickle sandwich rarely appears in American lunch routines, though it endures in Britain as a classic pub fare. For older generations here, it sparks memories of after-school snacks, summer canning season, and the quiet comfort of a sandwich that didn't try too hard yet always delivered. Hot dog sandwich. The hot dog sandwich is one of those meals that sparks arguments about definitions. But for many families, it was never about philosophy. It was about practicality. When hot dog buns weren't around, or when stretching a package of Franks to feed a larger crowd, plain sliced bread stepped in as the stand-in. A hot dog laid across a folded slice, maybe 2 dogs tucked into a full sandwich with condiments smeared across, became a fixture in countless kitchens from the 1940s through the 1970s. It wasn't glamorous, but it was quick, cheap, and resourceful, the kind of improvisation that defined mid-century American home cooking. The hot dog itself had already cemented its place as an affordable protein, beloved at ballparks and backyard cookouts alike. But at home, hot dogs were weeknight saviors, boiled, fried, or grilled in minutes. Bread was always on hand, unlike buns, which went stale faster and cost extra. So families folded Franks into slices of white or wheat bread, spread with mustard, ketchup, or relish, and called it dinner. Sometimes the bread was toasted. Sometimes a slice of American cheese was added. And in a pinch, one slice of bread could be folded like a taco shell around a lone dog. Nostalgically, the hot dog sandwich recalls childhood evenings when meals weren't about presentation, but about getting everyone fed. It was the flavor of summer nights when buns ran out, of hurried school lunches, and of grandparents who believed in stretching every dollar. While some dismiss it as a compromise, others remember it as a comforting staple, proof that creativity mattered more than convention. Today, the hot dog sandwich lingers mostly as a memory, often joked about online as the ultimate poor man's meal. Yet, in its own way, it represents American ingenuity, a sandwich born not of rules, but of making do. Fried bologna sandwich. Few sandwiches carry as much working-class nostalgia as the fried bologna sandwich, a kitchen invention that transformed an ordinary cold cut into something hot, hearty, and satisfying. For many families, especially across the South and Midwest, bologna was a fridge staple, cheap, pre-sliced, and ready for school lunches or quick dinners. But when it hit a hot skillet, sizzling in butter or its own fat, it took on an entirely new character. Edges curling, center blistering, aroma filling the house. That transformation was enough to make it feel like more than just a sandwich. It was comfort food at its simplest. The sandwich rose to prominence during the mid-20th century when affordability and speed were the twin priorities of home kitchens. Bologna, already marketed as America's favorite cold cut, could be bought in bulk and kept for weeks. Frying it gave depth of flavor, a smoky crispness that mimicked bacon or ham at a fraction of the cost. On soft white bread spread with mustard or mayonnaise, the fried slice became the star of a meal that felt indulgent even when money was tight. Preparation was straightforward but ritualistic. The bologna slice was scored with little cuts to keep it from puffing up in the pan, then fried until golden brown. Some cooks stacked multiple slices, others topped them with American cheese and let it melt into gooey perfection before sliding everything onto bread. It was messy, greasy, and deeply satisfying. The kind of food that made kids race to the kitchen when they smelled it cooking. For many, the fried bologna sandwich is a bite of memory, lunch at grandma's house, midnight snacks after a long shift, or a Saturday meal when payday was still far off. Though it's rarely seen on menus today, it remains a testament to how even the humblest ingredients can taste extraordinary with a little heat and care. Egg salad sandwich. The egg salad sandwich has long been a fixture of American lunchrooms, picnic baskets, and kitchen tables, a humble creation that managed to be both frugal and indulgent. For decades, it was the reliable option when meat was scarce or when families needed to stretch ingredients into something filling. At its core, the sandwich was nothing more than hard-boiled eggs mashed together with mayonnaise, mustard, and perhaps a sprinkle of salt and pepper. Yet its creamy texture and rich flavor gave it a kind of comfort that far outweighed its simplicity. The roots of egg salad stretch back to the early 20th century, when eggs were cheap, plentiful, and easy to prepare in bulk. During the Great Depression and through the rationing years of World War II, egg salad became a practical choice, providing protein without the cost of meat. School cafeterias embraced it as a staple, and homemakers could whip up a batch in minutes with ingredients they almost always had on hand. By the 1950s and 60s, egg salad sandwiches were as common as bologna or peanut butter, wrapped in wax paper and tucked into lunchboxes across the country. Preparation varied by household. Some cooks preferred a chunkier texture with larger pieces of egg, while others blended it smooth. Add-ins like celery, onion, or pickle relish gave crunch and brightness, while paprika or dill lent subtle flavor. No matter the variation, it was typically served on soft white or wheat bread, sometimes with lettuce to add a crisp counterpoint. Nostalgically, the egg salad sandwich carries the scent of boiled eggs wafting through the kitchen and the memory of messy, slightly squashed lunches pulled from brown paper bags. Today, it may not command the same popularity it once did, but it endures as a symbol of thrift, comfort, and the enduring appeal of simple food done well. Loose meat sandwich. Before the sloppy Joe stole the spotlight, the loose meat sandwich was already feeding hungry Midwesterners with its unpretentious charm. Born in Iowa in the 1920s and popularized by made-right diners, the loose meat sandwich was a simple creation. Crumbled ground beef, seasoned and cooked until tender, spooned generously onto a plain hamburger bun. Unlike its saucier cousin, it wasn't drowned in ketchup or tomato sauce. Instead, it celebrated the savory flavor of beef itself, accented with onions, mustard, or pickles, depending on the cook's preference. It was messy, yes, but in a way that felt homey rather than chaotic. The appeal of the loose meat sandwich came from its balance of affordability and satisfaction. Ground beef was cheap, easy to stretch, and could feed a family quickly. In an era when diners were booming, this sandwich was perfect for short-order cooks, quick to prepare, hearty, and portable. Customers loved it because it felt like a hamburger stripped down to its essentials, a meal that didn't try to be flashy, but filled the stomach and warmed the spirit. Making one was straightforward. Ground beef was browned in a skillet with onions and a touch of seasoning. Salt, pepper, sometimes Worcestershire or vinegar for tang. The meat was drained but left crumbly, not pressed into a patty, then heaped onto a soft bun that absorbed just enough juice without falling apart. Served with mustard, pickles, or nothing at all, it became a regional tradition that spread slowly but never quite achieved national fame. For those who grew up near Made Right or other local diners, the loose meat sandwich is pure nostalgia. The smell of sizzling beef, the taste of mustard on a fluffy bun, the sight of families gathered at counter stools. Today, it lives on quietly in small-town diners, a reminder that sometimes the simplest food leaves the deepest mark. Chow mein sandwich. The chow mein sandwich is one of those culinary oddities that could only have been born in America, a mashup of Chinese-American cooking and the country's undying love of sandwiches. Emerging in the 1920s and 30s in New England mill towns, particularly around Fall River, Massachusetts, it became a regional specialty that baffled outsiders while feeding generations of locals. At its core, the sandwich was a scoop of chow mein, crispy noodles smothered in a savory brown gravy with bits of celery, onions, and sometimes chicken or pork, spooned onto a soft hamburger bun. The result was a messy, slurpy, oddly satisfying meal that blended cultures in the most practical way. Its origins came from Chinese immigrants who opened restaurants near textile factories. Workers wanted affordable, filling lunches they could eat quickly, and chow mein fit the bill. To make it portable, it was slapped between slices of bread or a bun, transforming a stir-fry into handheld fuel. For just a nickel or a dime, it was hearty, cheap, and unlike anything else on offer in the cafeteria lines of mill workers. Preparation wasn't complicated, though it required a bit of finesse. The chow mein itself was cooked in large batches, with the noodles fried crisp and the vegetables simmered in a thick soy-based gravy. A ladleful went onto a waiting bun, the top pressed down until the sauce began to soak through the bread. Eating one required skill, or at least a stack of napkins, but that was part of its charm. Nostalgically, the chow mein sandwich speaks to immigrant ingenuity and the ways food adapts to its environment. Today, it lingers mostly as a quirky regional memory, occasionally popping up on menus for the sake of tradition. To those who grew up with it, though, it isn't strange at all. It's comfort, history, and identity stuffed into a bun. Fried oyster po' boy. The fried oyster po' boy is a sandwich that carries the spirit of New Orleans in every bite. A mix of grit, generosity, and culinary flair born out of necessity, but elevated into legend. Its story begins in the late 1920s during a streetcar workers' strike, when a pair of brothers who ran a restaurant promised to feed the poor boys who were out on the picket lines. They did it by stuffing loaves of French bread with whatever they had on hand: roast beef, gravy, or most memorably, fried oysters. The name stuck, and the P.O. Boy became a New Orleans institution. The oyster version quickly stood out as something special. Gulf oysters were plentiful, cheap, and beloved by locals. Coated in cornmeal and fried until crisp and golden, they were piled high inside the crackly yet soft French bread unique to the city. The sandwich was then dressed, meaning layered with shredded lettuce, sliced tomatoes, pickles, and a smear of mayonnaise. Each bite delivered a contrast of textures: the crunch of the oysters, the chew of the bread, and the cool freshness of the toppings, held together by a briny sweetness that tasted like the Gulf itself. Making one was straightforward but depended on fresh ingredients. The bread had to be right: light, airy, and long enough to hold a generous portion. The oysters were seasoned, dredged, and fried in hot oil until just crisp. Everything came together in minutes, a humble dish that felt extravagant in its abundance. For many, the fried oyster po' boy is more than food. It's memory. It evokes family gatherings, Mardi Gras parades, and afternoons at neighborhood joints where the sandwich was eaten hot and dripping with flavor. Though po' boys today feature all kinds of fillings, the fried oyster version remains the purest symbol of New Orleans' resilience and hospitality. And there you have it, 30 sandwiches that once filled American lunchboxes, dinner tables, and hungry stomachs, but have mostly slipped into memory. Some were thrifty, some were quirky, and some were downright strange, yet each one tells a story about resilience, creativity, and the way food connects us to the past. Which one sparked a memory for you? Did your family have a forgotten favorite of its own? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed this trip down culinary memory lane, don't forget to like the video, share it with a friend, and subscribe for more stories of food, history, and nostalgia.